The Black Lives Matter movement is continuing to grow, and there are various chapters in a lot of countries, both in Europe and also on this continent. This particular clip is going to give you some additional information on what's going on in Canada as far as the that particular chapter of the Black Lives Matter movement is concerned.
Folks, since the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012, the Black Lives Matter movement has grown to become a major force in America. They have demanded that issues that affect African Americans be included in the discussions of politicians, including presidential candidates. But are they the new voice for the unheard? Is the Black Lives Matter movement replacing more traditional civil rights organizations when it comes to a younger generation? We've been covering this story for quite some time and talking about the impact. When you look at laws, we look at the fact that more than 40 laws have been passed in 24 states in the past 2 years. When you look at the massive protests, when you look at what's happening on social media, what role or how critical the role is Black Lives Matter playing in changing the conversation in Black America, and will they supplant traditional organizations? Right now, we want to bring in Cornell Belcher, a brilliant Corners Research, who did a poll about this very issue. Cornell, let's start with the discussion in terms of the poll itself. Why did you do it? And let's talk about, again, this dramatic impact that Black Lives Matter is having on the political discourse nationally, but definitely in the Black community.
We added a question onto a national poll that I was doing, quite frankly, rolling, because I was curious and no one else is asking the question. This is what happens when you have a black pollster. And we've been having a conversation. And we know we've been having this conversation about leadership, and you and I have talked about it, and you talk about your show all the time. Are we seeing a new face, a change in leadership? Well, I wanted to quantify that, and I got to tell you, I was surprised. And look, I've been watching the Black Lives Matter, and there's been a lot of debate about their tactics and what they're doing, and I was surprised at how quickly they've come and are now challenging traditional civil rights organizations, icons, as representative and speaking for them. In our poll, we found that 34% of African Americans nationally, side with the traditional African American civil rights groups like NAACP, Urban League, and individuals like Reverend Sharpton, et.cetera.
Reverend Jackson,
Mark Mariel, and others. That's the traditional icon groups. And then we asked, or do you think that, or you agree with the statement that groups like Black Lives Matter, Black Youth Project 100, etc., represent and speaks for you? And what we found is a 39% plurality right now, falling on the side that Black Lives Matter. Now, not surprisingly, that's being driven by Gen Xers, all of Angela's friends, and millennials, and when you look at
pluralities, Angela fans, I'm in that Gen X. Don't be just trying to act
I'm on the cusp. Okay, be still.
Well, 40.
I was born in '79 at the end of the year, so I'm technically.
Yeah, but you still in it. Don't be trying to front like that. Don't be trying to hop in wide in millennial. Go ahead, Cornell.
47% of millennials side with Black Lives Matter. A plurality of 40% of Gen Xers, and then as you go up the age ladder, it goes down where you have a plurality of baby boomers and a strong majority of seniors siding with the traditional icons. And it's surprising that are we seeing a baton passed right now in our country around generational leadership, and what will this mean for politics in the future? Clearly, as Obama steps off stage, will you see more strident voices rise up? I think you are.
Well, one of the things that also I think that you're seeing is that you can see in the presidential campaign, when you look at Senator Bernie Sanders, when you look at Secretary Hillary Clinton, and you really can see this sea change where you have Black Lives Matter, who frankly forced Senator Bernie Sanders to be far more aggressive when it comes to the issue of criminal justice reform. We also the video when they stormed the stage at Netroots and demanded he does something more. He was a little ticked off, but he had to get over it. But then of course you then go to Secretary Hillary Clinton when she might roll out a Congressman John Lewis, iconic figure. She might roll out traditional civil rights folks, but the reality is that doesn't resonate the same. Now, what I do find to be interesting when you see Hillary Clinton then align with the mothers of this movement that have lost children. The previous mothers were Betty Shabazz,
right,
Coretta Scott King, Murray Evers Williams. So those were the wives of the movement, if you will. Now all of a sudden, when you have Sandra Bland's mother, when you have Sabrina Fulton, then when you have, of course, Lucia McBath. So all of a sudden, that's a different sort of focus.
That's right. That's right. And I think a lot of this discourse, look, you and I have talked about it for years. Demand is what pushes politics along, and clearly they stepped to the stage, they've demanded this, and they've gotten a reaction to it, and good for them.
I want to pull up, bring in Black Lives Matter activist Elle Hearns. Also want to talk to our panel. You've already heard Angela jump in here before I get introduced. Of course, we have Amber Phillips, the co-director of Black, Michael Singleton, Republican political consultant, Angela Riley, principal CEO for Impact Strategies. And so, Elle, I want to start with you. I mean, this is huge because you're only talking about. Yes, Trayvon. I mean, the death of Trayvon Martin, 2012. Then you had, of course, the trial in 2013, and it was the reaction of the trial where the hashtag Black Lives Matter was used to really speak to this feeling Black folks had. So you go from 2013 to now April 2016. That's only 3 years. That is a huge sea change in only 3 years. Mm-hmm. Speak to that.
Yeah, I think that what that significant change looks like, I think was, I think I'm still shocked at it actually. So like I'm going through all of the things that transpired over 3 years when I hear you speak to that.
I hate to say this, but she wasn't ready for that question or to answer that question. So she's going to kind of fumble this piece of it.
I don't think the impact of those 3 years has really settled in how quickly the maturation of this current movement happened. I don't necessarily think about it because we're consistently organizing in the face of obviously continued violence systemically and structurally. So 3 years, it's very quick, but also very needed considering what people are facing.
Angela, when the Black Lives Matter activists in Minneapolis, when there were all these different reports about the chants that they made, I remember talking to several folks, and I said, you need to understand, you're now playing a different game. You're no longer this upstart, these sort of different group. I said, you have to understand now that yes, this movement is decentralized in that there's no one organization, there are these collective groups, but you now have to understand what one does over here can impact the national discourse. And I remember how mainstream media turned on Black Lives Matter after these particular protests. These chiefs came out and said, oh, you're responsible for these deaths. I tell folks all the time, when that happens, then you understand where you're now playing in the big leagues as opposed to sort of being this sort of fringe group.
I think there are a couple things. One is the movement took off, I believe, because it spoke to what the hearts and minds of America's young people were really feeling and thinking. And it took the power that exists in the level playing field of social media like Twitter, where everyone has a voice. Of course, now you can get a Twitter sponsored tweet or whatever and pay for that, but for the most part, it is like the perfect example of what a level playing field in a democracy looks like. And so part of that is, I don't know that they necessarily signed up to take on that responsibility, but to your point, no, you don't have a choice anymore, right? It's like you're speaking for a group of people who for so long have felt disenfranchised and voiceless. So I commend you all for it.
Amber, I'm going to bring this up to this, and this also ties something that Angela did. This is very interesting. So after the death of Trayvon Martin, there were so many people who were angry and upset, and we had this late night call that Saturday night. They had another one on Sunday. Now, you had a couple of folks who were millennials who were complaining, who were complaining, Angela, well, why folks like rolling on this call? Why are they doing stuff? And Angela said, who the hell you think tweeted out to their followers? The reason I'm making that point what Cornell's poll is showing, this ain't a millennial thing. This is a post-civil rights movement baby thing where you have Gen Xers, Generation Y, and millennials in sort of this group. So you got folks who are ranging from 18 up to 48, 49, 50.
Right. And I think there's a common misconception that Black Lives Matter activists are just folks who up and started organizing. Elle and I were both present for the Netroots Action. I've been organizing since 2012 on politics, and I think in the 3 years, the reason why you're seeing it pop up and resonate with so many different people is because you're seeing people do something that we've never seen before. Before you had where the coalition was the wives of the movement, so leaders. Now we're organizing parents of people who have died. We're kind of a step back in that sense. So when you have people like Bree Newsom snatching down flags, we've never seen that before.
Well,
so
no, I got to correct. You have seen it before. The difference, though, is it's now this generation's time in the 21st century.
Right.
Because, I mean, when you literally go back, look, you look at what C.T. Vivian was doing. I mean, it
was also presented as history to us. This is something in the past.
They have not seen it.
We have not seen it. We're in the sense of like we should be going to the Urban Link happy hours, and then turns out we're still being murdered.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to make that point, sure, Michael, because I think we make a mistake when folks say this never happened. No, it happened.
No, absolutely.
You may just not be aware of that history.
Never seen it
Gotcha.
before,
There you
which
go.
is different.
I think, regardless of one's views on Black Lives Matter, even as a Republican, as someone who loves politics, I think this is great to see the next generation sort of become active, become involved. It's as if, as you stated, the battalion has been passed on to them, and regardless of your opinion.
Actually, it wasn't passed. They just took it.
They took it.
Well, as I said, we're just going to run our own race, which John Lewis said, Schnitt did the exact same thing.
Yeah, but regardless of one's opinions, the beautiful thing about America is that we live in a democratic process where you have the ability to bring the grievances forward, and I applaud them for doing so.
Cornell, here's what I think is important in the next piece. The traditional groups, they've been around a long time. There's something to be said about infrastructure and longevity, and also building capacity, national chapters, national organization, international reach. I think for Black Lives Matter,
Okay, there is something to be said for longevity, but there's also something to be said for fresh blood. And in my opinion, all of these guys that were doing all of the civil rights marches and organizing in the 1960s, the majority, if not all of these guys are out of gas. And I point you to all of the fossils that are in the Congressional Black Caucus and all of the fossils that are falling in behind Hillary Clinton. And for me, it's the new people that, excuse me, are supporting Bernie Sanders. That's where the life is. That's where the blood is. That's where the fever and the temper is. So, yeah, the NAACP and groups like that did have their purpose, possibly still do have their purpose, but the tip of the spear is now going to be organizations that are being formed, like the Black Lives Matter movement.
and I think in those terms, versus if you look at SNCC, lasted about 10, 11 years. Now we talk about it in historical terms.
But one of the things, quickly, the pieces was problematic in that infrastructure building is you also have, a little over, roughly around 20% saying neither. And I think that's what you see in the younger generation as well is, no one speaks for me. And this ideal of no single individual, but a celestial of individuals, I think from a organizing standpoint, that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the basis of our existence as a network, as a movement, is really dependent upon people in their local communities having autonomy. And so we saw BLM Chicago, we saw BLM Cleveland actually have a stake locally in the politics. And so that's really the goal, is for the people to lead their own causes as opposed to us dictating as a network or as leaders what people should be doing.
Well, Angela, 30 seconds left. Part of that is because also, if you compare the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, that was a different situation because you were trying to change national law. laws. A lot of the issues we have today are local laws, so that's what also matters, having local organization and infrastructure.
Absolutely, but I also have to say, you started the segment with this, they've had national level impact already, and I think that speaks volumes to the capacity, capabilities, and talents of our folks. So again, I'm grateful.
All right, Cornell, where can folks see more about the poll? Where can they go?
Oh, go to my website, brilliantcorners.com.
Yeah, I was trying to get you.
And follow me on Twitter, Cornell Bell.
Trying to get the black posters some attention.
And hire a black host.
I'm not saying. Yes, Democratic National Committee and Candace.
So I'm going to find a link for a video that was done by another YouTuber, and it had to do with Black Lives Matter Canada and the issues that they have up in Toronto. Hopefully I'll be able to find that link and add it to the comment section.